So we're getting ready to come to the end, and I want to give all our speakers a chance to offer their solutions. Joining us via Skype is Dr. Gerald Horn.
I'm sure you know that with regard to this deal that has just been negotiated by the Obama administration, it's unclear whether or not it will pass muster in Congress, and if President Obama vetoes their attempt to sabotage this deal, it's unclear whether or not Congress will be able to overturn that veto. We already know that the putative incoming Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer of New York, has not only turned against this deal, but is lobbying his colleagues against this deal. I would hope that one of the priorities coming out of this convention would be placing pressure upon Congress to have this deal pass muster, because once again, it will be difficult to have domestic justice as long as international injustice prevails.
Okay, Gerald, we appreciate that. Gerald Horn. Bill Fletcher, you got about a minute.
In terms of race and foreign policy, I just want to reiterate the importance of highlighting the racialization of immigration, that in this country we're not dealing with just immigration in general, but the political right has racialized it. We're dealing with, in foreign policy, the intervention and the willingness of the United States to allow certain states to collapse, like Somalia and Libya, and the failure to respect sovereignty. Now, domestically, the issue that was raised to me about race and labor, let me just say this very quickly, that when we're looking at the current explosion of the Black Lives Matter movement and these efforts around police lynchings, what we need to understand is that the deeper question is that of the racial differential in treatment that permeates this country. This is not primarily an ideological question. This is not about making people feel better about living together and why we can't all get along. It's about the system of race and the way it's constructed. And so when we're looking at the situation, we've got to understand that as this country polarizes further on basis of class, as the wealth rises more and more to the top, that we're going to see increasing battles among the so-called 99%. There will be increasing battles, particularly by whites who believe that the only way to elevate themselves will be to reinforce the racial differential as opposed to tear it down. So the job of progressives is to really highlight these issues and to build a sort of a new majority in this country. That, it seems to me, is the task that faces us all. And that means you can't avoid race. You've got to hit it, otherwise it won't fall.
Bill Fletcher, we appreciate that, and thank you so much. Stephen, you get some last comments.
I want to underscore the importance of recognizing the connection between racism and foreign policy and racism at home. I don't care how powerful AIPAC is, you would not have had so many Democrats supporting the slaughter in Gaza, in which if the 1,200 civilians who were killed were white people. And I think we need to be real careful not to say, oh, it's not their fault. It's just a nefarious cabal of rich Jews behind the scenes that are really running things. Let's not use anti-Semitism as an excuse for these Democrats' racism. That this is a test to see what they can get away with. And so far, I think the progressive community has failed. The wording of these resolutions, I talked about how dangerous they are, not just in terms of international humanitarian law, but here at home. And yet, some of the very supporters of these letters and resolutions have been endorsed as so-called progressive heroes by Democracy for America, by Move On, by the Progressive Campaign Committee, and even in a couple cases, Progressive Democrats of America and Peace Action. Now, they would not have gotten away with this I mean, they think they can get away with this because we're giving them a blank check. Well, I'm not saying, vote third party. I'm not saying, don't, to give up on them. But what I'm saying is they need to have the same kind of pressure we gave Democrats on Vietnam, on Central America, on East Timor, on nuclear issues, and not from an anti-Israel perspective, but from a human rights, anti-racist perspective. This is, and to make that connection and to hold them accountable.
Because what is done supposedly for us, without us, is not really done for us. And too many times I do see basketball courts being built when we don't actually want a basketball court. We want critical thinking centers. We want our youth not to just believe that they're entertainers, but they're doctors or scholars, they're architects and things of that nature. I was released at the end of January. So since then I've been just on the go, running around, sitting in offices, talking to people, things that never in a million years would I have imagined me sitting down, actually talking and advocating with people on things. And too many times I've sat there and thought to myself, that's never going to work, and has spoken to the ones that this is actually going to affect either in a positive or negative way. So I think we need that. That's my one kind of solution. With subpoena power, that is, we need subpoena power on these community review boards. A lot of times I've seen all bark, no bite. So we need to be able to hold these police departments accountable for their actions. And I heard someone speaking on the gang documentation, Proposition 21 and things like that. That actually falls under the STEP Act. The STEP Act was created in the 80s when they came out with the war on gangs. There's 9 criteria where they can document somebody as a gang member. If you meet 2, then you're a documented gang member. Out of the 9 criteria, they are so broad, I can honestly document every single person in this room as a gang member. No exaggeration. And because you're with a person who is documented as a gang member, everybody in this room already has 1 strike against them. So, bail. That is a great point. I believe we do need to get rid of bail. They set my bail at $1.1 million. The reason was because they said I was a menace to society. A menace to society with no criminal record, a menace to society, college educated, a menace to society who they had said didn't commit any crimes. And they're just making money off our bodies. They are making money off dark bodies. So I believe if we do get rid of the bail or find ways to reform things like that, it would, slow the slave trade down that they have going on with the prison industrial complex. So thank you, guys.
Following him is Chauncey.
I'd like to echo all of the suggestions that have been made. I already put forth some policy recommendations and actual engagement that everyone here in the room can partake in. So in general, I think one important point to recognize is the significant power of the Black Lives Matter movement and paying attention to the critical point in time in which we live. We have the wind at our backs right now, and it is not always there. I think going into, with the presidential election and all that stuff, a key thing for everyone in this room to do is to hold the candidates accountable when it comes to the issue of valuing Black lives and recognizing the existence of white supremacy in our present-day society. I think everybody has seen some of the incidents that have occurred throughout the nation with Bernie Sanders. I see a lot of folks here with Bernie Sanders pins. Let's hold this man accountable and make sure that he has a platform that speaks to the current issues. It's not just economic justice, it's racial justice. And let's hold all these candidates accountable and make sure that they have a platform for valuing Black lives, protecting them from deadly uses of force by law enforcement, and make this a pressing issue that they have to address in this next presidential election. Thank you.
Okay. Let's give it up for our panel. One thing that I would encourage people to consider is that we're in an information age, and those who hold significant amounts of power and sometimes are in control of microphones are very slick at distorting information and having us think that the person to the left is doing A and the person to the right is doing B. It makes sense for me as a media person to depict it that way, but it might not be the truth at the end of the day. You feel what I'm saying? Like people were saying, well, why did they just protest only Bernie Sanders? What about the other people? When in reality, just as somebody who covers it, a lot of people been smashed on, a lot of people been protested. And it ain't just Black Lives Matter people who've done it. There's been gay folks that have stepped up and shut stuff down. There's been Code Pink that has shut stuff down. And a lot of people have stepped up and shut things down. But if you only focus on one, you might say, well, did they do Bernie Sanders? Yeah, they did Bernie Sanders one week. They did the city council in Oakland the week before. They did the mayor in, there's a whole lot of folks that have been shut down. And I just use that as an example to note that if we are politically under this tent, whether you call it a Democratic tent or if you call it a left-leaning tent, then how much do we really know each other? And so as this political season goes along, maybe those house parties and those gatherings that people have should also be an opportunity to do political education, not about a candidate's issue, but about the voices of people who often aren't seen, so that when they talk about a particular issue, you are very much aware of it. If you have somebody from who's brown, you know their history, whether they're Mexican, whether they're from El Salvador, whether they're from Guatemala or what have you. You really understand the nuances and the subtleties and the things that make those particular communities click, rather than just relying on CNN and MSNBC or Fox or a poll to assume that we know what people are really thinking. And it works both ways. People might not really know all about Bernie Sanders, but if the conduit for knowing about him is a media that doesn't really want to get too deep in the first place, then we're all going to be blind. So we're going to have to make very deliberate efforts to gather people who don't look like us, don't seem like us, put us all in the same room, and as you're organizing, say, you know what, let's watch this documentary, or let's have a book club, and let's come back and have these type of discussions. So even if you don't win an election, you're still a healthier community because at least you fundamentally know the person to the left and to the right. So that's something that we may want to consider, and I thank you for your time, so give it up for yourselves for coming out.